there folks, JD here, and today we're going to be going through the JD20, the JD20S and the JD20S Pro. Three quadcopters, all from the same family, all come out at different times. So the JD20 came out in 2017, we flew it in 2017. The JD20S came out in 2018, likewise we flew it in 2018. And the JD20S Pro came out in 2019, and I've only just flown that. So what we're going to do is look at all the quadcopters, each of them in turn. We're going to look at the camera, look at certain features, find the positives, find the negatives, and then I'll let you know exactly which one out of the three that I would recommend in order for you to buy, if there are in fact any that I would recommend. So let's start off on the JD20. This was the first in the family of the quadcopters. I did find there were a couple of really good positive points for this particular quadcopter and a couple of really quite negative ones. So one of the largest negative ones was that it had a very wide arc when it turned. So you could turn it just by banking it. You could turn it just with a lot of yaw, or you could turn it and bank it. And I found that it would turn, but I found that its arc was extremely large. So when you started turning her, normally a quadcopter would start to turn, and then the motors would pick up in the direction you're going, and then it would propel the quadcopter forward. This one seemed to take an awfully long time to actually spin right the way around and then propel itself forward. That did confuse me a little bit, and also I had to ensure that I had a much wider area in order to turn this quadcopter successfully so it didn't hit anything. The camera quality looked okay, it was passable, but it was very fisheye from what I remember. The fisheye lens really stood out. The overall design of the quadcopter was sturdy. I thought the quadcopter felt good, it looked good. It had something, even though it was essentially a Spark clone, a DJI Spark clone, it actually pulled that off quite well, I thought, and it looked quite nice. Now, there was one downside of this particular quadcopter package that I really didn't like, and that was the fake antennas on the transmitter. I am not a fan of those, and I honestly think that they should be stopped. They just look hideous. If they haven't got an antenna running through them, then don't include them. Just have blanking plates on the transmitter, and that does just as fine job of blasting out the transmission, and you don't have these really unsightly transmitter aerials on there. Coming on to the JD20S. So the JD20S tightened up in a few areas. That arc decreased quite a lot. It was quite smooth. It was easier to 360 flip. It was easier to actually move around. The camera quality was a little bit better. The camera lens looked as if it was a much different one. They had redesigned the body slightly as well, so it looked a little bit different. All in all, I think it looked quite nice. So we have the JD20S here, and it looks quite sweet. So it has quite a nice little style difference to the front versus the JD20 that didn't have that. The camera as well had a little silver ring going around it, and that just showed you exactly where the camera was, but it looked quite nice. And the front of it as well, these 2 points here that hold the camera feel a lot sturdier than in the JD20. Once again, the body itself is pretty much the same. I mean, you've got the same sort of styling on this. There isn't really a lot of difference other than a couple of cosmetic paint jobs. That's about it. Still got the same brush motors, still make the same noise, and that was easy. As soon as I took this straight off, it just reminded me straight back of flying the JD20. All in all, though, it had a much better battery life. So in the first quadcopter, it was about 10 to 11 minutes. This was coming in at 14 to 16. So already you can see that they have included a much higher capacity battery to give you that extra time. I've flown this about 4 or 5 times, and every time I'm looking at over 14 minutes battery life of flight. Honestly, I think that's great. I wish more quadcopters had that, because I get really immersed in my flights and I really like to have quite a long time with my quads. All in all, this was the JD20S, and I thought it was actually pretty good. And it did tighten up in areas of the JD20, well, being the first quadcopter, just had a couple of issues with. So then we come on to the JD20S Pro, which is the newest of the three. Now, as you can see with this particular model, it essentially looks the same as the JD20S. There's not really a lot that's going on with it. I had to get in touch with Banggood and ask them if this was actually the Pro model, because if you put them side by side, let me open up this other one, then they look identical. And the packaging didn't even state that one was the Pro. So they look exactly the same. Now, the only difference between the 20S and the 20S Pro is the camera. That is it. You have a 5 megapixel camera at 1080p on the JD20S Pro, whereas you don't on the JD20. That's not 5 megapixel, that's 2, again at 1080p though. So there's really not that much of a difference. When I looked at the JD20S, I said one thing in my flight test, and that was that I really wanted to see an optical flow system on this quad. And I was hoping that when I had the Pro, I was hoping there was going to be an optical flow sensor in the bottom here. There is not, and I think that is a real glaring omission. There really needs to be, because optical flow has essentially turned, I know this is very loose, don't pull me up on it, but it's essentially anybody that has flown an optical flow quadcopter versus a quadcopter with just altitude hold, there is one thing you will see, and that is that it locks the position, not flawlessly, there is a bit of movement, but you haven't got to worry and you haven't got to always auto-correct the quadcopter to get it to stay in one particular level. She will stay there and she will hang. Not as efficiently as GPS, but still, it sort of replicates that same sort of non-movement. And there wasn't anything like that on the JD20S Pro, and again, I think that is such a waste, I really do. The camera quality on the JD20S Pro looked passable. Again, it didn't really stand out massively compared to the JD20S. I really would have wanted this 5 megapixel to shine, be really, really bright, be really nice, be really clear, be crisp. Okay, not to the point of DJI, Unique or any of those larger brands, but still be a much clearer difference. All honesty, I think they look pretty much the same. What do you think? Let me know. So, as for flight time with this, I've flown this twice now, so the battery has had 2 charges whilst in my possession, and because I don't know how many the factory does before they actually give them to us. And the first test was 11 minutes, and the second test was just over 11 minutes, so 11 and 40 I think. So the battery life on this is a little bit shorter, but the camera length has increased, so therefore you may notice a bit of a fluctuation in battery life versus the JD20S. But is that extra megapixel worth the decrease in battery? I don't think so. I think I would have much rather have had an 11-minute battery with optical flow. Then I would have thought to myself, right, do you know what? They've actually added optical flow and it actually works really well. I will take the extra 3-minute or the 3-minute hit off that battery. So stacking all 3 of these next to each other, which one do I think is the best? Well, they all have good points, they all have bad points. But I honestly think if you're going to go for any of them, if you're looking at one of these and you don't know which one to go for, and if you're dead set on getting one of these, then I would say go for the JD20S on its own. Not the Pro, just the S. It's got the longest battery life, it's stable, it's a good copter, it is. You're not going to get DJI stability, it costs £30. You know, it really isn't going to be all singing, all dancing. But if you're a beginner, if you want to get into quadcopters, or if you've had one and you think to yourself, oh, this is broken, I want to get another one, do I just jump for the Pro, do I stay with the S, what do I do? I would honestly stay with the JD20S. Don't go to the Pro, there's not that much difference, and you're going to pay an extra £20 for the Pro. And the JD20, well, there are things that just weren't tightened up, as I mentioned in the start. So all in all, I would say if you're going to go for one, if you're dead set, or if you're replacing one that you've damaged or broken, the one that doesn't work anymore, I would say the JD20S, out of all 3 of them, I think is the better out of the 3. Now, where does this leave Where does this leave Jingdatoys, the manufacturer behind this? What I want to see, and what I really want to see, I want to see optical flow systems. So I want to see, ideally I would have wanted to have seen it on the Pro, but we're not there, so I'm not going to bother harping on about that. I want to see a quadcopter with altitude hold, possibly GPS, can kind of take that or leave that, but I definitely want to see optical flow. Now the reason I want to see that is because I think this would be a far superior quadcopter with it. And not just that, you would have the extra stability for photos or for videos or anything that you were trying to capture, be it good quality, bad quality, whatever. If you're trying to capture it, you need a quadcopter which is stable, and that's what I want to see. Now, I very much doubt they're going to watch this on my little channel, but at the same time, I really, really, really would like to see optical flow in your next quadcopter, in your next 20 lineup, put it that way. So that's just my thoughts on the 3 quadcopters, where they began, where they ended up, and just everything in between, really. I know these quadcopters have come up against quite a lot of negative views. Some people like them, some people hate them. You get that. It's just down to personal preference. Now, I bought 2 of the JD20s, the original one, and both of the ones I bought were good. They still had their issues, but they both flew pretty much the same. I was quite happy. I've only bought one of the JD20S and one of the JD20S Pro. I'm not going to be buying another one of these. Of the Pro models, I don't think it's worth the extra couple of quid on the S. So these are just my thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think about them as well. Have you flown them? Have you not? Do you stay with toy grade quads? Have you got a specific manufacturer of these toy grade quads, if you're going to bracket them in that really horrible name that you like? If you have, what is it? JJRC, Eachine, JD, whatever. Let me know in the comments, folks. I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope this has been of some use to you. Thanks ever so much for watching and listening. I've been JD. You've been fantastic as always. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Hello and welcome to all the new subscribers. I hope you're enjoying the channel. So until next time, my friends, happy RCing.